Meanwhile, on Thursday, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson made history when she became the first Black woman ever confirmed to the Supreme Court. Today at the White House, Judge Jackson, alongside the president and vice president, celebrated the moment.
It has taken 232 years and 115 prior appointments for a Black woman to be selected to serve on the Supreme Court of the United States. But we've made it. And in the poetic words of Dr. Maya Angelou, I am the dream and the hope of the slave.
A powerful moment. Earlier this week, I talked to a number of Judge Jackson's closest friends. Here's what two of them had to say.
It feels like, ah, and it's coming. That's my emotional response, but
Yeah.
it does feel like it's a coming full circle. This is what we recognized in her so many years ago.
During the hearings, just watching her, I felt her pain, to see what she went through, to see that she was strong, that she persevered. It really speaks not only to Black women, but women everywhere.
Nia, what's the significance of this moment?
You know, this is a huge, huge moment. You saw that she was so moved in that ceremony today, and millions of Americans all across the country are moved too. Not just Black Americans, but white Americans too, to come to this moment. So often, if you think about the civil rights struggle and the sort of Black freedom struggle in general, it has been about prevailing on the courts to recognize the humanity of African Americans, the full humanity, the equal humanity of African Americans, and we know that that hasn't always been the case in previous centuries with judging how African Americans fit into this country. And now you fast forward to this day, and you think about people like Thurgood Marshall, you think about people like Constance Baker Motley, who was a clerk of Thurgood Marshall, as well as a hero to Ketanji Brown Jackson. She stands on their shoulders. She talked about them in her speech. And in that moment where she said, we've all made it. And Yamiche, when I got on here with you, I said that to you. And I think that, you know, might become a sort of catchphrase among African-American women who haven't seen themselves in these positions of power. Not because they're not qualified, not because they're not smart enough, because they were, quite frankly, barred from holding positions like this. You saw today in Joe Biden. I mean, he was happier than I think we've seen him in quite some time.
Well, he was actually
over these last.
He was so
Yes.
happy
I mean,
at the White House. And I think I want to also ask you one other thing, which is that she said that she was the inheritor of justice for all and the promise of America. But some of her friends also told me that in this representation, they also see that there are limits still, that this cannot be sort of where things stop, that this country has so much more to do, and that just having a Black woman on the Supreme Court or even a Black woman vice president, that's not enough. Talk a bit about that, too.
No, I think that's exactly right. And we sort of went through this discussion as well a few years ago when Obama was elevated to being the first Black president. And that was obviously a watershed moment, but still so much work to be done in terms of breaking down barriers for African-American women of all socioeconomic backgrounds. You know, on the one hand, I sort of smiled when she said we've made it, but I kind of said, well, have we all really made it? Because we do know that there's still these barriers based on racism, based on sexism as well, that we saw on display, quite frankly, with the hearings and the way that she was treated and the sort of racial undertones and overtones, quite frankly, and the way she was treated with disrespect even after she was confirmed with that 53 vote margin. It was a remarkable moment to see Vice President Harris, the first African-American woman to be vice president, to read that into the record and make history. That was quite a moment. But it was also a moment where you saw some Republicans essentially just walk out and show such disrespect for that moment.
And what Nia is talking about, Jeff, is sort of the partisanship of this, the politics of this. what do you hear from the White House about this moment and what it means to them? But also, I want to, if I could scoot in a second question here, which is that Mitch McConnell has said that he's not sure that he will let another nominee through if Joe Biden gets a second chance at this.
Yeah, a couple things. One, I think in terms of how the White House is reacting, it was just a joyful day at the White House, and you saw Jen Psaki afterwards in her briefing try not to tear up because of the emotion of the moment for her and for everyone at the White House. Politically, Yamiche, it's important to mention this is an example, and it's a pretty concrete example of President Biden making good on a campaign promise. Presidents don't always get to do that. He had this opportunity, and he fulfilled it by nominating Judge Brown Jackson, and now with her confirmation, he can say, "Look, I didn't just promise to do that; I fulfilled it," and that's a big deal for him. And it comes politically at a time when he is not doing super well in the polls, and only several months still until the November elections. But this could be a jolt or a positive jolt in the arm for Democrats, for progressives, for Black women and men who are an important part of the Democratic constituency that President Biden needs. To your question about Mitch McConnell, surely that also is part of the overall political picture here. If indeed Republicans end up gaining control of the Senate and perhaps the House as well after November, and should there be another Supreme Court opening, Mitch McConnell has said very clearly that he would follow the same playbook he did at the end of the Obama administration, which is not let it happen. And Democrats don't always vote about the Supreme Court. Republicans are much more effective at getting their voters out to vote in favor of a candidate because of what's at stake at the Supreme Court. I'll be curious to see if that changes at all now. Not that there's any openings expected anytime soon on the Supreme Court, but you never know. We certainly saw at the end of President Obama's presidency that an opening can come up unexpectedly.
Yeah, well, in some ways, the White House will really have to calibrate that, but they do have a lot of other challenges. Jeff, I want to, in the minute and a half that we have here left, ask you about COVID, because it is the reason, of course, why, unfortunately, we're remote tonight. It's the reason that so many people in D.C. are wondering how to move and navigate through this. There are a number of people, high-profile people like House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and the Attorney General that now have tested positive this week. How concerned is the White House about a spike in COVID cases, and specifically also about the president's health?
Yeah, it's also the reason I have a husky voice, so I apologize to your viewers for that. As far as the White House is concerned, what was interesting to me today is their strategy seemed to shift early this morning to preparing the country and the world and the media for the possibility that President Biden might get COVID. They've been saying, of course, that they're taking precautions, and they have. And yet he was certainly very close, perhaps not under the CDC definition of a close contact to Speaker Pelosi earlier this week, but very close. And, of course, he's been around Vice President Harris as well, who has been exposed. I think they are worried, but I think they're trying very hard not to project that. And yet also giving the sense or giving a heads up that if he does, they're ready for it, and they think and they say that he will still be able to govern.
And Nia, last 30 seconds to you. There was this $10 billion COVID relief package that was blocked by Republicans over immigration. If you could, in the last, now I'm told 15 seconds, can you explain the politics of that?
Listen, we'll see if it happens. I mean, you have Republicans not wanting to spend this much money. You have them tying it to immigration reform. For now, the Senate is out for a recess for 2 weeks. We'll see if when we come back, whether or not they want to take up this $10 billion, which would be for COVID planning in the future and testing and vaccines in case there is another surge going forward.
Certainly. Well, the White House is saying that they definitely need that money. Thank you so much to Nia and to Jeff for joining us and for sharing your reporting.